I'm Catherine Sheeran, host of the podcast Horse Tales with Cat. My guest today is a show jumper who was born in Huntley, New Zealand, but now resides in a small village in the southwestern coast of Sweden. Bruce Goodin is a 5-time Olympian as well as a World Equestrian Games competitor. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
So I love to always begin with where you came from and how you started your journey with horses. And particularly in your case, I was interested to read that you had actually been on a horse with your father when you were 1, if I'm not mistaken, but you didn't really start pursuing it seriously till you were in your teens. So I wondered if you could share that journey with us.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in New Zealand, and my dad was always a rider. There were always horses on the farm and ponies. And I can't remember it, but I have seen pictures of me sitting on a horse when I was a baby. My dad sitting on the horse and me sitting up there with him in front of him on the saddle. I was introduced to horses very early on. I have twin older brothers and an older sister, and we were all encouraged to ride. And one of my brothers and my sister rode quite a bit in their teens, but gave it up later on for various reasons. My other brother, he was not interested at all, but my dad, he made us all ride for at least 6 months so that none of us could say that we weren't given the opportunity. And that was his kind of policy on the deal. I'm the youngest in the family. I didn't really, it's not something that I really took on at a young age, but probably when I was about 14 or 15, then I really got the bug. I always really liked animals. Growing up on the farm, liked horses, liked the cows. My parents probably thought I was a bit weird because I could sit when the cows used to be in the front paddock, and I can remember this very clearly, being 9 or 10 years old, when there would be the bulls in the herd of cows. And this one particular year it was a breed called Chianina, which were really, in my eyes anyway, beautiful animals. I wasn't allowed in the paddock with all the cows, but by myself anyway, because they thought that was a little bit unsafe, especially with the bulls and with the cows at the same time. So I would grab this aluminium step ladder out of the garage and set it up just on the house side of the hedge and sit up there, and I could sit up there for hours just watching bulls roaming around in the herd because they were so beautiful. Always liked animals, but I probably thought the horses it was a lot of work to tack up my own ponies and that sort of thing, get them out and have to brush them and put the saddle on, and before you could then get to go and gallop around the paddock, where a motorbike was much easier. I liked the action. I liked to go fast. And a farm bike was much easier. You just turned it on, kicked it over, and away you went, and you just chucked it back in the shed when you were done. But it wasn't until I was probably, I think, 14 or 15 where I started to actually be successful, because that was the other thing as well. When I was younger, I just didn't win anything and couldn't really understand why. My friends would go to the local gymkhanas, local ribbon days, that sort of thing, and my friends would win lots of prizes, and I thought I was pretty good, but the judges never gave me any prizes, or they always put my friends before me, which I thought was rough. But anyway, when I was about 14 or 15, I did start to do better and actually won an event and thought, this is actually pretty good. So then started to put a bit more time and effort into it, and things led on from there.
Well, I was struck by your story because I actually spoke with Richard Spooner last winter, and he had kind of a similar experience as you. He loved the animals. He could spend hours watching the animals, but he said he wasn't very successful in his earlier years, and so he was fairly discouraged. And that's why when I read about you, I thought, isn't this quite fascinating that there's 2 really good high-level riders that in their early years really didn't think about pursuing it because they weren't having success. And I would imagine that would be rough, seeing your friends all winning and you not getting a prize. And yet what's also astounding to me is you made a pretty quick rise once you got the bug and started working with different people? I know you worked with Joe Fargas, Conrad Homfield. I saw Jan Topping. And I also do remember that Kyle Dewar was telling me the story of he first saw you when you went to Spruce Meadows and were second in that big, I believe it was the CP rail class at that point. And you were a second to Ian Miller in Big Ben. And I think you were only 20 at that point, were you not?
21, yeah.
21. Wow.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about then once you got the bug and decided to pursue this. It seems like you had a really good sense of who you should train with, because all the people that I mentioned are really top level riders. And obviously they weren't in New Zealand, which, from speaking to Sean Wordley from New Zealand, I understand it's really tough to be a competitor there because it's just such vast distance between competitions. And so most people leave and go either to North America or Europe. So maybe share a little bit about that with our listeners.
Yeah, so once I did start to have some success, then things did progress pretty quickly. I was in a fortunate position where, my dad was a rider, and he at that time was a little bit more forward thinking than most people in New Zealand. He read a lot about riding. He was probably one of the first show jumpers to understand the importance of good dressage, that sort of thing. And we did both eventing and show jumping, actually. Because I was tall, also, I got off ponies for New Zealand standards reasonably young. Like, I think I was still riding a pony when I was maybe 15, but I was really tall. It was just because I wanted to go to the Pony Club Championships that I stayed on the pony. But once I did that, then I got off, and then I was riding hacks. And my dad gave me some of his horses to ride, and people started to see that maybe I had some talent. And I started to, win a few classes against the adults. Then it was the 80, because, the New Zealand summer is the opposite, way around from the Northern Hemisphere. So basically at that time in New Zealand, competitions the show season would run from the end of August through to Easter time, because, you're just going into spring, summer, and then, the early stages of autumn. At the end of that 86-87 season, Pamela Carruthers, she was the resident course builder in Hickstead and also in Spruce Meadows at that time. And there was a guy called David Murdoch who ran a really good show in New Zealand, and he would invite foreign riders out there it was a fun week for those guys that came and rode borrowed horses and had a good time. And Pamela Carruthers, he managed to somehow get her to come and build the courses for the first, 3 or 4 years, something like that. And she spotted me riding there, and she said that the selectors in New Zealand, they should talk to my dad and ask him if he would actually give me his Grand Prix horse, because then maybe I would have a chance for the 88 Olympics, even though I was only going to be 18 at that time. And so they did talk to my dad, and he thought that I was too young for that. But he told me that they had spoken to him about it, but he had said no, that he thought that I was too young for that pressure. And then he had been talking to some people in New Zealand, what should be my next move? What should I do? Because I was leaving high school when I turned 17, wanting to ride full time, and over the winter, what would be a good plan for me to do? And so this guy who ran this show in New Zealand, David Murdoch, he had these contacts with the international people. He said, well, if it was up to him, I should go to America and just go and work there for a couple of months and gain as much experience by watching these top riders. And especially people in the United States have always been top riders, but at that time in the mid to late 80s, they were on top of the world. They were the gold medalists, 10 gold medalists from both LA and the World Championships in Aachen. And, we're winning every single World Cup final. And so we wrote to a few of those riders that had been to New Zealand. One of them was Joe Fargas, and he was actually the only one to reply. And he said, yep, you can come over as a working student. You won't get paid anything. You won't get to ride, but you'll get to see a lot. And so I said, great. jumped on a plane, went and spent 3 months there. I was just 17. And this is what I tell young people today. It's a lot different back then than what it is today. You know, there were no mobile phones, of course. Gave my parents a phone call on a landline when I arrived to tell them that I got there safely, wrote them 1 letter a month, and called them the night before I came home. And that was it. Had never cooked for myself before, probably hadn't done laundry for myself before, so I had to learn those things pretty quick as well. So that was an amazing experience. And I didn't ride a horse until the very last week, where Conrad, Joe's partner, said, okay, because you've been working really good, we'll let you sit on a horse. And so I got to sit on 1, maybe 2 horses in the last week that I was there. But I just, I groomed for the clients, and I asked Joe, I said, it doesn't worry me that I'm not riding, but if whenever you jump your horses, if I can set jumps for you and pick your brains. And he said, yep, that's fine. I would pick his brains. And it became a bit of a standing joke. He'd be like, okay, what questions do you have for me today? And I'd be like, why are you doing this? What are you doing there? That was really an amazing experience for me, because it really formed the way that I was going to ride. And I went to a couple of big shows in North America, like Lake Placid and Southampton and that sort of thing, and got to see all these other great riders like Katie Monahan and Michael Matz and all these legends of that time of North American riding. So it was just an amazing experience for me. And then when I came home, it was like one of the first dinners that I was having with my family back home. And I said to my dad, my dad was longlisted for the 88 Olympics for both show jumping and eventing. And I sort of said to him, half jokingly, I said, I've been looking at your schedules for the qualifications, what the New Zealand selectors are requiring you to do. And those for both disciplines, they're going to clash. So I think you should just give me your jumping horse. And he said, okay. And I was like, what? Yeah, he did the eventing and I did jumping. And that's how it really started, because I was, I'd left school. I was riding full time at home, had a string of horses and had Grand Prix horse. And then, started to get some success. Won one of the Olympic qualifiers and had some other success, and then ended up at the end of that season winning the Horse of the Year on a borrowed horse, actually, from a family friend. She hadn't been going so well on the horse, and so I'd been pestering her a little bit to let me ride the horse. And so finally she let me ride it at the Horse of the Year, and we ended up winning the Grand Prix. So that was also pretty cool, and it went on from there.
And so what year was that approximately?
1988.
Okay. And so then Reservation, the horse that you went to Spruce Meadows and had tremendous success on, who owned that horse and what was its story?
That was a New Zealand bred horse. It was bred by a guy called Tony Webb, who was a farmer about the same age as my dad. And he had bred the horse and started the horse. It was out of a mare that he had previously jumped. And so we had seen the horse all the way through. He, in 1990, had qualified for the World Cup final. I think it was in Dortmund. And so he went to the World Cup final with this horse, and then stayed on and did the World Championships in Stockholm that same year. And then he came home, left the horse with Pete Raymakers in Holland. He'd got to know Pete and got on well with Pete. And so had decided to leave the horse for the winter with Pete. And then after he'd come home, he had decided that really New Zealand was where he wanted to be. He didn't want to be traipsing all around Europe and doing that sort of thing. So as much as it pained him, he would sell his horse. And we got wind of this, that the horse was for sale and that some Americans were coming to try it. So then we managed to organize a quick meeting with Tony, my dad and myself, and managed to thrash out a deal where we bought half the horse to start off with, and then would buy the other half at a later stage. And so we put a syndicate together, a bit like a racing syndicate, where lots of people with small shares in the horse. And so we bought this horse without sitting on him. And then I was going to be based at Mark Todd's place in England, because we knew Mark quite well. He'd actually worked for my dad on the dairy farm when I was about 6 and 7 years old. before he became a famous horseman. So I went and based myself at his place in England. We had the horse shipped over from the Netherlands to England. So it was there when I arrived. And then we started to do shows and did some national shows in England, did some international shows in France and Luxembourg, and did Hickstead. And then I managed to get an invitation to the Spruce Meadows Masters. I had met Ron Southern a couple of times in New Zealand because he was on the board of a New Zealand company called Fletcher's, which had forestry interests in Canada. And Fletcher's always sponsored the first class in the international ring at the Masters tournament. And so Ron would have to come to New Zealand for board meetings. And whenever he did that, he would try to come and visit a show in New Zealand. So I'd met him once, at least once, maybe 2 times. And because of that, and he also knew the horse that I was riding, he had actually tried to buy it for his daughter, Linda. And so I can't remember exactly how we asked them for an invitation back then, whether we actually called them or sent them a letter or something like this. I don't even know if we were using fax machines back then. But anyway, somehow we managed to get an invitation to go there. And the other international riders that were there, they were just like, who are you and how on earth have you managed to get to this show? Because back then it was the biggest prize money show in the world. And it was amazing. It didn't start out so amazing. There were lots of crazy situations back in those days, through just greenness and ignorance and that sort of thing. I was living in England, basically no money, and just scraping around from week to week. For individual riders to go there, you had to pay $5,000 for the 2 horses to get put on the plane. Team horses went for free, but the individual riders for their 2 horses had to pay $5,000, which was still not a lot of money, but it was a lot more than I had at that time. But I saw that in the Grand Prix, if you just finished the Grand Prix, you got $3,000. So I thought, well, for sure I'm going to finish the Grand Prix. I'll get $3,000 there, and with a bit of luck, I'll pick up a little bit of prize money here and there. So I should be able to pay the $5,000. But I had failed to read exactly how much the entries cost as well. I hadn't really counted on that. Mm-hmm. And then the first competition day, when we got to Spruce Meadows, my horse was very fresh. He had a lot of blood. He had a lot of blood to start off with, and then he was very fresh and started in the big class the first day, and he knocked 2 jumps out quite hard, and it really stressed him out, and he actually got colic that evening.
Oh, no.
And I'd got to know the English team vet at the airport in Frankfurt when we were putting the horses on, and so managed to get hold of him, and he helped me a lot. The colic wasn't severe, and we were able to give him some medication, and it settled down quite quickly. But my plan was to ride Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, day off Saturday, and jump the Grand Prix on Sunday. And he advised me that although when he looked at my horse again on Thursday morning, he said he's much better, but I can feel that he still has a bit of stomach pain. If I was you, I wouldn't jump him today. So, okay, yep, I won't do that. So then I did start him on Friday, and he actually jumped clean in the big class. And then I had 2 down in the jump off, trying to go quick, and still got a prize. It was like 9th or 10th or something like that. But I still felt that I was a start short of being ready for the Grand Prix. So I thought I'll just start him in the speed class on the Saturday morning, because Saturday's Nations Cup day. I'll just start him and give him a cant around in that class. Anyway, when I walked the course in the morning, first half of the course was very twisty, and you couldn't really go fast. And I thought, I can be quite quick here without going quick, just by turning short and that sort of thing. And this class, I think it was worth maybe $17,000 or $18,000 to win, which was more money than I'd won ever in my life before. And I thought, if I can be clear in this first half, then the second half was just up the bank by the in-gate, down the bank, straight down over a water jump, straight down over the Devil's Dyke. I'd already jumped both the Mill Street Derby and the Hickstead Derby, and I knew my horse was super brave at these natural obstacles. and then there was like a sharp turn back around and one more fence, and then over the sort of like table fence and home. So I thought, if I'm clear over this first half, then I'll just let him roll in the second half. So that's what I did, and I ended up winning by 3 seconds.
I love it. And now all your bills are paid.
And now all my bills are paid. I'm like, oh my God, this is such a huge relief. And later that day, I'm doing the entries, or going to the show office to do the entries for Sunday. And there's another speed class, similar sort of deal, like Parcours de Chasse kind of speed derby class on the Sunday for pretty much the same money. And I thought, maybe I should just do that instead of the Grand Prix. I have a really good chance of winning that class as well. And then I was like, no, I've won a lot of money already, got the trip well and truly paid. It's more money than I've ever won in my life. I've come here to jump the Grand Prix. That's what I should do. Then I go in the Grand Prix, have the second to last fence down in the first round, but have a very quick time. And there's only 3 clear rounds: Big Ben, Igano with Jos Lanzik, and Ratina with Pete Raymakers. And so I'm the fastest 4-faulter. The competition back in those days was 2 rounds and then a jump off, and those who are tied for placing, it's the faults from both rounds and the time also from both rounds. When it came to the second round, I thought, this time I can be a little bit steadier, because I was quite a bit faster than all the others. Again, my greenness, I was too fast to the second to last fence, and that's what actually cost me the second to last fence. So then I could take it a bit easier and, manage to jump clean, and then watch the last 3 go. And the first ones, I can't remember exactly what order they went, except for that Big Ben was last to go. Both Pete and Jos have a rail down, and then there was also a little bit of, I was laughing with Kyle about this a couple of weeks ago. There was some discussion amongst some of the riders that Big Ben had actually stepped on the tape, and that they hadn't actually put the flag up because it was, he was the Canadian hero and all that sort of thing. So there were other riders, and Ian's going around the course in the second round and looks like he's going to jump clean, and a few of the riders are coming to me like, you should protest. He stepped on the tape. You should protest. And I'm just thinking, no, I want him to be clean, and I'm sitting on second with a lot more money than I've ever won in my life. I don't want to be in a jump off with Big Ben, Milton, Igano, Ratina, Japalou, all these horses. I'm really happy if I get second. And that's what happened.
Oh, I love it. The reality is, this is like a fairy tale story. I'm surprised there hasn't been a movie.
Yeah, it certainly, at the end of that week, it certainly seemed like a fairy tale, that's for sure.
Well, and also I'm struck by the fact that this horse of yours, he did a fair bit of jumping. I mean, even to imagine, I feel like nowadays people kind of only do maybe 2 warm-up classes and then the big class. And here, your horse was jumping the morning before and the winter. So it wasn't like you were holding back on that Saturday. But I also think, just karmically, the fact that you decided, no, the reason we came here was for this. It's almost like instinctively, somehow you knew your destiny was to do the big class. And what a remarkable finish. I'm always shocked. I was saying to a friend that I wish that at these big classes, they wouldn't just follow the winner, because I feel like the real story is often the second and the third place horses. Because you're the outsider that no one even knows about, and they're probably a little bit up in arms that you got the invitation. And I can imagine you probably did have to write a letter. And I can also say, I myself met Ron Southern once, and he was a lovely, lovely man. And so I could imagine he was probably so excited to have you there and get that. It validated his inviting you.
Yeah. And also, just to add to that, one thing that really sticks in my memory about going there was Ron Southern was actually in hospital with the flu. It was the first time ever that he had missed the riders' meeting on the Tuesday night. Then he checked himself out of hospital on the Wednesday morning. I was walking from the stable up to the show office to pick up the start list for the day, and saw this golf cart coming flying along with a bunch of people on it. And then it's just about to go past me, and I jam on the brakes, and Ron Southern leaps off, and he puts out his hand and says, Bruce, Ron Southern, so glad you could be here. And I was just like, whoa, I'm sure not half as glad as I am to be there. But, that was Ron. He had an amazing ability to never forget a name. And for sure, that's also why I did well there, was because I did feel welcome there. At that time, being a very green rider, those things made a big difference. For sure, at a lot of other places that I went to where I didn't feel like I belonged, I didn't ride very well, but there they made me feel like I belonged there. So it went well.
So interesting, because I went to Spruce Meadows 30 years ago as an amateur rider. And I would say that was my overwhelming feeling, is they did make you feel exceptionally welcome. And I just remember every week there was a gift. I remember that they gave you like a pair of gloves. There was a step stool. I think there was a corkscrew, all with the Spruce Meadows logo. But
Right.
it really, I've said to many riders, if you can go anywhere as an amateur, I mean, they don't really have the amateur divisions anymore at Spruce, sadly, but I can tell you it really is an experience unlike any other that you go to. And I can't imagine that your first time going, you get to go in the international ring. A ring that I'll never get to enter with a horse, but how phenomenal a story. And absolutely, I feel like Netflix should be doing this, and maybe they will.
Yeah, you never know. One thing that I really regret is that when I look back at it, I wish that I'd got a really good picture of the lineup, because it's like, one of these guys is not quite like the other one, because it was Ian and Big Ben, me, and then Milton, John Whitaker, Igano, and Jos Lanzik, Rotina and Pete Raymakers, and then I think it was Japalu. Japalu was there somewhere in the lineup as well, and so was Kidam with Hervé Godignon, and it was basically the who's who of top combinations of that time, and then there was me. And
And now you go down in history as one of the top people at that time in that class, for sure.
in that class, yeah.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about your approach, because I was interested to read, you've been to the Olympics 5 times. So you were there in 92, 2000, 2002, 2008, and then most recently in Tokyo. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the 2000 was Sydney, is that correct?
Correct.
Because I read something about, I think it was your individual rounds, that you had a really good first day, and then you felt like the second day your nerves took over, you were distracted. And then as a result of that, after those Olympics, you did some sort of meditation course. And I was fascinated by that, because I feel like I've talked to a few riders who have said anybody who tells you that they don't have nerves walking in the ring and jumping 1.50 meter, 1.60 is lying. Because you definitely, even if you've done it many times, there is a stress level that comes along with that. So I was interested to have you actually speak about it. So I wondered, how did you address that? And would you say, are the nerves still there for you, or has that been able to be sort of compartmentalized, I guess?
I certainly have skills now, I guess you could say. It's not that I have terrible nerves or terrible anxiety or things like that, but depending on the competition, you want to do well. Nerves are just fear of the future or fear of the past, lack of presence. And so that was just to really quickly go through what happened in Sydney. The first day, yes, I was first equal. There were only 4 clear rounds. All of us had time faults, and myself and Jeroen Doubeldam were the 2 fastest on that day. Was a tough course. And I think because the horses had been in quarantine for a long time, they were a little underdone when they went in. The course was a little bit too rigorous for the horses, being a little bit underdone because they'd been in quarantine for quite a long time to be allowed into Australia. But I'd been out there in Sydney the whole time during the quarantine. I know Sydney reasonably well. I know my way around there. I have friends in Australia, and I was just having a really nice time out there. And so went into the first competition, didn't have expectation because I certainly wasn't a favourite and that sort of thing, and rode well but relaxed at the same time, and ended up jumping a clean round. And then all of a sudden, then I'm like, I can really do this. So then I had expectation. So then I rode tight in the next round and had a foot in the water as well, which my horse never stepped in the water, but I rode poorly to the water, ended up having a foot in the water and having 2 other jumps down or something like that. In the third qualifier, I knew that as long as I didn't really screw it up, that I would qualify. So I purposely overrode the water because I didn't want the horse to get into a habit of stepping in the water, and then had 1 other fence down because he was too aggressive because I'd overridden the water. So then already during those 3 rounds, understood my mental state, what had happened. The first round being relaxed because of no expectation, then having expectation, dealing with it in a good way the third. So then I sort of thought that I had things under control when it came to the final. Started off in the final, was going really well, riding well, and then had got 2/3 of the way through the round and had just jumped out of the triple combination, which was quite tough. Then there was like a straight line to a big vertical going directly towards the end gate. And I can still remember this so clearly. I jumped out of the combination, and then in my mind, I saw the finish. I saw the scoreboard, the finish saying 0. And then like that, the connection with my horse was gone, and I had 4 of the next 5 fences down. And really, like, all of a sudden, my horse was like, "Where did you go? Where are you? What's happened?" And so, of course, I was gutted and realized what had happened. So I thought, I have to dig deeper into this and see what I can do to stop this from happening again. And so that's when I started to investigate about meditation and things like this, to basically train myself to be able to stay present under stress and develop skills to deal with things like this in high stress situations.
I love the story because it's so authentic. And I think we can all relate to what is interesting in your case. It was just the disconnection, which I can for sure, as an amateur, I can honestly remember around in the last year where I thought, great, we're going clean. In my head, same thing. It's like they're going to cheer. And then it was just like, all of a sudden we weren't there. So I can relate to that. But interesting, in your case, it wasn't a case of you having the kind of nerves where you go blank. It's not that I'm feeling sick before I go in the ring kind of nerves. It's the I got away from my horse, which leads me into another question I had wanted to ask you about, because I did read that you had worked with some trainers that are into, I guess, sort of horse psychology. It's more horsemanship. And I wondered if you could share a little bit about that, because that to me connects to your story about being mindful and connected to the horse at all times, because you also have to be mindful of what's going on with them. So that's kind of a nice bridge to that question that I had.
So it was actually Sean Wordley, a fellow New Zealand rider that lives in North America. He was the first one that actually introduced me to the idea of natural horsemanship, some ideas of how it works and that sort of thing. And he gave me a very basic introductory level to it. And then I probably, because I didn't understand it well enough, then it's not that I forgot it, but I didn't work with it so much. And again, this is mid 90s, something like that. There wasn't the internet back then. It's not that you could just look up and find lessons of Pat Pirelli or Buck Brenneman or these guys online. There wasn't a lot of people to learn the stuff from. But then it obviously had stayed in my mind, and Sean had taught me enough to make an impact that there was something there about it. Over the years, then I've looked to try and find people that are interesting, that I felt had something to offer. I have worked with a couple of different people in Europe with it, and it's still something that I seek people to learn more from. It's something that I'm quite passionate about, because it's about being a better horseman. I love competing for sure, but my end goal, I guess, there is no end, and it's just to become the best horseman that I can possibly become.
I love that, because I feel most riders at your level that are as good as you are all students of the sport. and they're always seeking to have something else that they learn that helps them with that communication with the animal. So I was curious, have you ever used an animal communicator? Because I haven't met many male riders that have. I've met quite a few female riders, but I was just curious. And you can laugh if you haven't and think that's crazy.
No,
But I feel like that's a natural expression of the Pirelli kind of method. I feel like they would go hand in hand, but I don't know if they do.
I've met animal communicators and that sort of thing, and some are pretty amazing, some are not.
I guess it's like any expert in an area. There's those that have the gift and those that don't. I was just curious because I just felt like not everybody is open to it, but I'm always curious to see if it has had any place in your training with any of your animals, because
it's not something that I am trying to be as an animal communicator. It's not something that I think that, well, I can have this ability to psychically communicate with the horses or whatever. I want to work with them on a very practical or ground level anyway, that it's understanding how they respond to things. Basically, I think it's quite strange that we as humans, the majority of us, tend to think that the horse should understand our language instead of us really working hard to understand their language and try to communicate with them. We're the ones who are choosing to work with the horses, not the other way around. We should be trying to understand their language and communicate with them in the way that they communicate in their world. And what I find is the better I understand that, the easier it is to work with horses. And also because of that, the better results I get as well. And it just brings me a lot of satisfaction and joy to work with them in this way. This is why I still ride horses, because I love working with them pretty much every day. And even if I don't compete to the end of my life, I will, which I probably won't, but my dad only gave up riding when he was 82. He just turned 90 the other day, but my dad only gave up competing when he was 82 and was still riding like meter 20, meter 30 on a very average horse when he was 82. So I've still got a few years ahead of me, maybe. But I will always work with horses on some level, I'm sure, because I'm always learning. And that's what I think is really satisfying about working with horses. And I feel very fortunate that I can do it till a ripe old age. And that's the real enjoyment for me.
And I would imagine because of that communication, it must bring you great joy when horses want to do something for you. And I imagine they do want to do more for you when you are trying to come from understanding what they need and what they want.
And that's really what I find with the horses as well. With the greener horses, it's actually much easier to train them, to work with them, I think, because they don't have a lot of baggage that they sort of have to. With the horses that have been worked with in a certain way, I find that it takes a certain period of time before they all of a sudden they realize, oh, you're actually working with me in this way. Oh, okay. And then things go really quick. In the beginning, it's a little bit like there's a lot of resistance and that sort of thing until they realize, oh, actually, you understand me. You're working in this way, and things, then the progression is much faster.
So I wanted to just step back and talk a little bit about your own riding, because I know you had a challenging accident last year. In Sweden, as I recall, and you've obviously recovered from that and are riding again. Do you still, at this point, aspire to wanting to ride for the team again and go to the Olympics? What's kind of on your bucket list moving forward? Because you've done a lot. You don't have to prove anything, but there's also no reason why you couldn't keep moving forward and represent the team again and get one of those elusive medals that everybody aspires to.
That's the thing that, yes, I still do have ambitions to ride at future championships. I would really love to win a medal. As long as I can stay fit and healthy, that I still have the passion to do the traveling, to go to the big shows. I like going to big shows. The time away from home is the hardest part for me because it's a lot of time away from my family. As long as I still want to do the shows, then I will keep showing as long as I'm fit and healthy. But yes, if I have ambitions to try and go to LA and to maybe to Brisbane as well, and we'll see what happens.
That was going to be my next question is, do you have a mount right now or any up and coming younger horses that you feel could take you there?
Yeah, horses come and go in this business, in this industry, unfortunately. I don't have anything that's championship level right now. I have one horse that's doing sort of like 3-star level, and I think he can do higher level. He probably won't be ready for the World Championships next year. I have some very interesting young horses coming up, and we'll have to see whether they A, are good enough, and B, whether the owners can be patient enough to hang on to them. Yep, we'll see. I certainly hope so.
Well, I'm hoping there could be another storybook ending, that there could be another horse that comes out of the background that you sort of know about, and you're able to make that your next mount for the next Olympics. I feel like that would be a perfect scenario.
Yeah, I hope you're right.
And just before we finish off, I did want to ask a little bit about your wife, Ulrika, and your daughter, Elizabeth. Are they also riders?
They are. Ulrika was a successful junior and young rider in Sweden, and she used to compete quite a lot, but she doesn't compete anymore, but she still rides at home, especially when I'm away at shows, then she will ride the horses for me at home. And my daughter, Elizabeth, she is riding a bit. She really likes the animals as well, and she likes to ride, and she's getting into the competition a little bit more, but she also has quite a few other interests as well, like dance and singing and theatre and that sort of thing. So I think it's a healthy balance, and to have other interests as well. So we'll see what happens.
And I did want to just close out with, I wondered, your father must be exceptionally proud of where you've gotten in the sport, given his own history and his own success. And I feel like because he also supported you in leaving New Zealand, which had to be hard for him, I imagine, being your dad and also being a show jumper, but he saw the opportunities available for you, and sounds like he encouraged you to go down that road. Where does he sit with all of this now?
Yeah, I was very fortunate with both my parents that they supported me in moving from New Zealand at quite a young age, because they could see that, that this was something that I really wanted to do, and it was not going to be possible to do it on a high level being based in New Zealand. They were great in allowing me to do that and not holding me back and saying, no, you have to stay here and do that sort of thing. So both my parents, I'm sure they are very proud of what I've been able to achieve and that sort of thing. I was actually just back in New Zealand last week for my father's 90th birthday. So that was great to catch up with them, because I don't get back to New Zealand so often. I try to go back once a year. But then when COVID was happening, we didn't end up getting back for, I think it was almost 4 years, because New Zealand had a very tight, strict quarantine procedure and lockdown period and all that sort of thing. So we didn't get back for quite a long time. I think they're pretty proud of me.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. It really was lovely to speak with you, Bruce. And I do really wish you that storybook ending for Los Angeles. I'm going to have my fingers crossed and try to send some good karma your way. And who knows, that mount, as you say, they come and go, and it could be just around the corner.
Yeah, let's hope. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming guests and the show, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Horse Tales with Cat.